I'm John Travis here in Mullumbimby, New South Wales, with Susan Campbell in Sebastopol, California, on what's the longest day of the year here and the shortest day of the year there. And Susan, we go back 40 some years from when you were my neighbor on Hillside Avenue in Mill Valley when I was running the wellness center. And through your partner at the time, Barry, I met my co-author, Regina, a big connection. Then I reconnected with you in 2001 when you published Getting Real, and I've been staying close to whatever you're up to ever since. I consider you my mentor and wise counsel. So I want to find out who you are and why today. The what is well documented elsewhere, and you're a psychologist. So how did you get interested in psychology?
Well, when I was in high school, I was the kind of person who everybody came to share their soul and their problems. And so I just naturally assumed that role in my social group. And I also, even before high school, was beginning to observe the culture and notice how phony people were. How people were so into self-image as opposed to something that I thought was more essential, like, what kind of a person are you? Are you a good person? And my family supported the values that I'm talking about now. So I didn't just pop into the world with that kind of consciousness. My parents were also somewhat critical of the social order of the day, and because the phrase we had in those days was keeping up with the Joneses. We got it now, keeping up with the Kardashians. But it meant basically living beyond your means in order to present a positive social image. And I got very interested in that theme and in the general theme of how human growth can lead to culture change.
Now, where did you grow up in cultural wise, geographically?
Schenectady, New York for the first half of my school years. And then when I was 13, so for junior high and high school, Binghamton, New York.
And your parents, what was their background or your dad's work? Did your mom work, or was she
my mom was a stay-at-home mom. She had 4 kids. She was really into being a mom. She was really good at it, and she played with us and didn't worry about whether the house looked good or not. So I love that kind of a mom. I grew up in a very child-centered household where we were really trusted to kind of run free. And my father was a businessman. He was a middle manager in a big corporation. He was a sales manager.
Given the Schenectady, it was probably GE.
GE, when his first years, he worked at GE, and because GE was there, that was one of the first little towns to have television, and so I used to be on television too, from the time I was like 9 years old till the time I was about 13 and got interested in boys. Then my TV career went out the window, but I was doing commercials on TV for things like Oreo cookies and Glamourine rug cleaner. Those were 2 of my, I could say, my clients.
I could see a young girl doing cookies, but rug cleaning seems a little beyond your age.
Yeah, I stood there with the little thing, the little rug cleaner attachment, and looked up at the camera. I remember some of my lines even, but I won't bore you with those.
And birth order and siblings, who were you?
I'm the eldest of 4, and I was 7 when my 3 brothers were then born, boom, 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 year and a half apart. And I'm very close to them to this day.
So were then you like a little mom to help out with all?
I was a little mom. So that's another one of these family of origin scripts that had me being a helper and a giver and all that.
Yeah. So you're in high school and you're playing Lucy with the little stand with the doctor
is in.
So after high school,
I even used to hypnotize people.
Oh, really?
I read books about stuff like this, and then I would I don't know if it was working, but I would regress them, stuff like that. I mean, that was my play. You know, some people play whatever they play, teacher or businesswoman. I mean, I played those kind of things too. You know, a lot of child's play is role taking for
Yeah,
adult role.
yeah.
I remember doing a lot of that. But yeah, but the hypnotist and the person who could sort of understand things that no one else understood, that was
Wow.
part of my self-identity.
And then you went off to college?
Yeah, right away, college. Did college in 3 years, got my master's in 1 year, and my
Where was that?
PhD in 2 more years. So I was only in higher education for like 6 years to go from high school to a PhD. I got my
Wow.
bachelor's at Drew in Madison, New Jersey, my master's at Temple in Philadelphia, and my PhD at University of Massachusetts in Amherst, clinical
In
psychology.
Amherst.
Mhm.
Wow.
And I taught at UMass then for 12 years until
Uh-huh.
1977. So I got my PhD in 67, taught there till 77.
So we were in Massachusetts at the same time. I was in med school in Boston, but
Ah.
didn't connect with you quite that early. So what was teaching like for you?
I loved college teaching. You know, I was teaching people who were older than I was, because it was a pretty well-known grad school, and a lot of people were coming back to school. Like I was on Quincy Jones. He didn't finish, but I was on Quincy Jones's doctoral committee, Roberta Flack's doctoral committee. Those two didn't finish. Yusef Lateef, famous jazz artist, he did finish. I was his doctoral chairperson, and we had his orals at a jazz club in Greenwich Village. UMass was happening. Bill Cosby went there at that same time. A lot of famous Black artists were graduate students at the school where I was a teacher.
Wow. And then I know at some point you and Irv Katz connected up, and I'm going to interview him next, I hope.
Oh, good. He's just turned 90.
Yeah. So after, what led you from teaching there to eventually getting to California?
Oh boy, you know, it's kind of a fun story, but I'll try to abbreviate it. I had never even seen the West Coast when I was there in my, I guess around age 30, early 30s, teaching at UMass. And I was walking down the street of Amherst, and on the curb next to a garbage can, it must have fallen out of the garbage can, there was a paperback book that said 12 Glorious Days in San Francisco, a self-guided tour. I picked it up, I sat down on the curb, and I flipped through this book. And I guess my time at UMass was starting to come to a close. I was starting to feel that the academic world was perhaps not a big enough world for me to be teaching in. I had a captive audience. I didn't have to really perform at my highest, you know, to get an audience. And so there was just something small about the university community. I miss it in some ways now, because now I'm, you know, moving toward retirement age, and it's nice to have that cozy environment. But anyway, I was outgrowing UMass, and California just looked great. So I applied for leave without pay. It's sort of like a sabbatical, except you don't get pay. And you still have to do research and do something while you're away. And I took a whole year off to sample living in San Francisco. And Irv Katz and I had been friends a few years already. We had met at Association for Humanistic Psychology conference, and had become really good friends. And he was thinking of doing a sabbatical himself. So we said, let's rent an apartment together. So we both got permission to leave our universities without actually leaving our jobs. You know, we had something to come back to. And we took that year and did a lot of the California workshops, all kinds of sexuality stuff, Morehouse. And we also started the graduate program in psychology at Antioch West, which later Will Schutz taught in, Lonnie Barbach taught in.
Yeah.
You know, in fact, one of my students was I can't even think of her name now, Starhawk. If you know
Really?
who Starhawk is.
I know. I'm interviewing her too. Yeah.
Yeah, she's written a lot of wonderful books.
Yeah. She's
and-
been a major factor in our evolution of wellness. So now I guest lectured for Will at Antioch West, and
No
that's when
kidding.
Irv ran into me.
Mhm.
What years were the? I thought that was.
That would have been, let's see,
I was there in '77.
it would have been about 75 that year.
A little before me.
Yeah, because then I quit in '77 to come back to California full time.
And you.
But I went back after I did my 1 year there, where I did the Antioch West year and did that teaching, and Will Schutz wasn't there yet, but he was there shortly afterwards. Then when I went back to UMass, I just took a year to finish up my grad students, and then I moved out to California for good in '77. But Irv and I had that apartment together for a whole year, and we had lots of parties, and we just got real connected.
What part of San Francisco was the apartment?
Sacramento Street, 3674 Sacramento Street. I can still remember the address. It was a nice part of town.
Well, now, because Will has died and he was a mentor of mine, I'm going to interview Ailish, but you knew him long before Ailish did. So let's take a minute to just talk about Will, since unfortunately we can't get him live, but what a character.
I loved Will, and we remained friends. We sort of had a few dates at one point at a AHP conference. We took a little trip together, and I think maybe he stayed at my hotel one night. I honestly don't remember if we had sex or not.
It wasn't that memorable, huh?
I know he did anal Rolfing on me, though.
Oh, that's interesting.
He said, Ida Rolf only trains a few people in anal Rolfing. You have to have really good ethics and boundaries. And I had already been Rolfed, so, I was a candidate for follow-up sessions. And that's what I remember about Will. Plus, he was just so much fun and so smart.
Yeah. Well, I was intimidated by him at first. He came on so strongly, but then somehow we connected, and I got to house sit for him when we would come back from Costa Rica, and really sweet guy. And I remember seeing him in his final stages with his Parkinson-like stuff, and how emotional he would get, because previously he was like a solid rock. And
I know.
And what a contributor he was. I remember watching him. I got invited to one of his corporate workshops down in Carmel Valley because he needed some extra bodies. And I watched him take a room full of these executives, uptight executives, go through his questionnaires, the Phiro Bs, and turn the room into an encounter group in one evening. It was like, wow.
Yeah.
What a skill he had. So, well, that's enough on Will.
Even though we were close, I didn't really experience him in that way professionally much. We'd have lunch and we'd talk about professionally. One time I said, Will, I'm thinking of bringing honest communication into the corporate world. And I know you've done it. He said, it doesn't work.
Well, but he found a way to do it.
If you know Will, it's just, it doesn't work. It's sort of, funny, but there's some authority there too.
Yeah, well, I think he eventually did find a way, because I watched him do it, but that was probably a lot later.
I don't know. I think he might have been just saying that.
Well, I'm guessing he was up against a pretty tough game. So let's move on to your couple's journey, and that was your work when you were in Mill Valley. Or what happened between San Francisco, and how did you wind up on Hillside Avenue in Mill Valley?
Yeah, well, when I first decided to come to California, um, from UMass. I sold my house, broke up with my boyfriend, and went toward California with no ties whatsoever. I didn't have any job. I didn't have any boyfriend. I didn't even have a community to come to. I just said, I'm going. But I rented a house in Berkeley, and shortly thereafter bought a house in the Berkeley Hills. So that sort of positioned me in a good neighborhood. Started having parties every Friday night, because that's the way I network, is parties. And I remember a few of the people that came to my parties, like Alberto Viodo, Kenny Dykewald, and some of the older Gestalt therapy guys, who were Abe Levitsky, Frank, Rubenfeld, cool people. Somehow I stumbled on that because Sam Keen kind of opened the doors for me to apply for a job teaching at Humanistic Psychology Institute. So even though I had gone to California with no job, by the time I got there, I did have a half-time gig at HPI. It's now called Saybrook Institute.
Saybrook, yeah, I was going to say.
Yeah, and so, geez, it was like perfect, because I love smart people, We used to have salons at Rollo May's house. I got to be really good friends with Jim Bugenthal, and these are giants,
Yeah.
That wasn't unusual for me, because when I was in UMass, I was very close with all the giants in the the T group movement.
Right, T groups. Yes.
I was right there in the group that pioneered T groups, and then I did a lot of encounter group leading, and so that's a lot of the roots of the Getting Real work that I do now.
Yes.
Plus, I was trained as a Gestalt therapist, did some groups with Fritz Perls, but mostly with the people he trained, like Jim Simpkin and those kind of guys.
Now, how did you get from Berkeley over to Mill Valley? I didn't know about.
I met Barry. Barry came to one of my parties. Verona Fonte, who is Joan Halifax's sister. I don't know if you know Verona, but Verona was a friend of mine through people I met at HPI. And she came to my party, and she brought Barry, and we fell in love right away. And then we got married. I moved into his house on Hillside, and then I met you. And you were famous then, Jack.
Well, I didn't
We were
know.
both more famous in our 30s than we are now.
Well, and there was another Susan Campbell floating around that I would get confused with, that Barbara McNeil, or did she? I never was clear whether she worked with you or the other Susan Campbell.
This is not ringing any bells.
Okay, it must
I
have
know
been
nothing about either of those people.
Okay, well, Bobby was my secretary originally and became the coordinator of client services. And then when I moved to Costa Rica, she stayed on, and she was working with a Susan Campbell that I thought was you, but I guess not. Barbara McNeil was her name then. But so you and Barry, and you did the couples journey together, or was that?
Well, I had already started writing that when I was living part-time with Bernie Gunther down at Esalen.
Oh,
another chapter.
Another big name.
Another chapter.
Yeah.
Right?
I had his book. What was the title?
Bernie was writing books a lot, and he was teaching at Esalen, and I'd stay home. He'd go down and teach, and I'd stay home in the house. It's now the Emil White, Henry Miller. It's now the Emil White owned it, who's a great poet, and then he had bought it from Henry Miller. So I was living with Bernie Gunther in Henry Miller's former home that's now the Henry Miller Library in Big Sur. So anyway, I'd sit there and I'd start writing about what I was learning about couples through the relationship with Bernie, through my couples counseling, because I was I was a psychologist, and I did private practice the whole time that I was teaching.
Uh-huh.
And, so that was always sort of parallel to doing groups, college teaching, and corporate consulting. So
Now, was this
I worked with
simultaneous?
all levels of systems.
Yeah. Was this simultaneous with the Berkeley House too? You were part-time in Big Sur,
No, this was before.
or
This was
before the
before.
Berkeley?
So I had already started the couple's journey before I moved to California. I was already working on it. I was sending it to publishers. By the time I got to Barry, I had a manuscript almost done, but he was a support in kind of refining some of my ideas. One more rewrite, and but he wasn't really a collaborator on the book very much. I would say Bernie was a little more of an inspiration, not a collaborator at all. But because Bernie was such a poet and he did poetry all the time, I started writing poetry, and I put poetry in the book, The Couple's Journey. It wasn't very good poetry, but it was a novel idea, and some people seemed to like it.
So, and your relationship with Barry was often, we teach what we need to learn. That's why I'm doing wellness. And with coupledom, I know that Peter, who you're with now, is like, you finally found your match, I think, as I did with Yvonne. And it took us a while, I think, but how long did it last with Barry, and what shifted you into getting real?
Well, first of all, Barry was by far not my worst marriage. One time, he was my third husband. By the time of my fourth husband, my father, who was a brilliant man, he says to me, "Susan, they just keep getting worse." He was right. But anyway, actually, Barry was the best of all my husbands. He's dead now, so I don't even need to say that. But I had a lot worse problems with the other three. Barry and I were very well matched, actually. But he wanted not to be monogamous, and that's why we broke up. That's the only reason we broke up.
Oh, okay.
It was very sad.
So
he broke my heart. Seriously, he broke my heart with that. But I couldn't tolerate. I tried to tolerate it. I did. We did conscious, open poly for a year. We taught workshops, and we were open about it. And sometimes he'd sleep with somebody who was in the group. We'd be open and honest about that. I mean, that's the old encounter model. You just do what you want to do, as long as you're willing to take responsibility and be honest for it. And we tried that, and our teaching was really good because we were so transparent. But I didn't want that life. I really wanted a different kind of intimacy.
So you moved on from Mill Valley?
I moved on, and I met somebody while I was having my open marriage to have my to be my fourth husband.
And then where were you?
And then I moved, and so then I moved out. So then that was 83, I guess, 82 when Barry and I split up, got together with Brent. We went sailing for 2 years on his sailboat in the South Pacific.
Oh, wow.
And during that time, I wrote the book, Beyond the Power Struggle.
Interesting.
It's the perfect book. It's a perfect book to be writing when you're trapped with somebody with a very volatile personality. So to sublimate my frustration, I wrote a book, and he was a very good writer.
Of course.
Yeah, he was a very good writer, so he really was a great support in the book. I would, show him the manuscript, and he'd. So that happened on the sailing cruise.
And then after that, how long did that relationship?
We came back to land, sailed back through the Golden Gate Bridge to Sausalito in 1985, and came to Sonoma County shortly, about a year after that. built a house in Grayton, and then we stayed in a condo for a little while in Santa Rosa while we were building a very big fancy house in Santa Rosa, 4,500
Oh,
square foot house, where then we really had some parties. You didn't know me then,
no, no.
but we were both, the hostess and host with the mostest. We were always having parties.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I'm not.
And that's when I was much more a psychologist and a corporate consultant, less, I backed off on doing workshops. Yeah, so, my career has had a lot of variety to it.
And then how did you get to Sebastopol?
Let's see, after I got divorced from my fourth husband, that was 1991. I had already gotten involved with the dance community, ecstatic dance,
Uh-huh.
in the town of Sonoma and in Marin County. Marin County had a big dance community, and I was always part of that. And so I got to Sebastopol because there was this Friday night dance that happened at this yurt. And I just loved all the people that were in the dance community there, and decided to buy a house in Sebastopol.
The one you're in now.
The one, yeah, that's right. The one I'm in now. Yeah, I've been here 20 years. And I'm
Wow.
still dancing 2 or 3 times a week with that community.
So what led you into the Getting Real work then? Is it around that same time, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, 2001 is, well, the late 90s, right around the time that, I was single. I had already been single for quite a while then, living on my own in Sebastopol. The whole Getting Real thing had always been a kind of work of mine, being more honest, being more self-aware, realizing that people aren't very good at being realistic about their own patterns, their own ability to be in reality. Basically the whole idea that, people are in their heads most of the time, they're not in actual reality. So I was beginning to be more observant and interested in that. And I'd always been interested in, how come humans can't learn from their experience? How come we need a crisis to wake us up? What is wrong with our ability to process our information and our feelings? And feelings is a very important part of the information that's coming in or that's available. But people were kind of just some in their imagining. In Gestalt therapy, we say, I hear you say this, and I imagine that you're judging me right now, that kind of thing. Our minds make up stories that are connected to our fears or our wishes. So I'd always been a little critical of people's ability to know what's what. And that probably was partly true for me too. I was, observing myself. I would go into therapy from time to time and, understand how certain addictive tendencies led me into relationships where I just wanted to be adored. And that sort of fed something in me. My girlfriend said, what's wrong with that? But I couldn't get out of a relationship that I really assessed was not good for me if the guy was so adoring. And so I was like very seducible. That's sort of my blind spot was in there. And, it has to do with my own needing outside validation and that sort of thing.
Well,
So
I just want to, as an aside, if it isn't obvious to the viewer, you're a model of transparency, which I think you've just been modeling. But
thank
one
you.
of my strong attractions and my aspirations myself. That it's so rare in this culture, particularly among professionals who have to be professional and not show your real self. So now, did Brad Blanton have anything to do with this?
I got introduced to Brad. I went to one of his workshops after I had already written the book Getting Real. I think it was somewhere right around 2000. I went to a workshop, but I had already written. It hadn't been published yet, but it was right around that same time. I was doing honesty workshops. I didn't call them Getting Real at that time. Up at Harbin during the late 90s. I called it the Honesty Workshop or the Honesty Event. And I read Radical Honesty, loved that book, met Brad, loved Brad. We became friends. And so I trained with him. I went through all the training to become a certified Radical Honesty trainer. I haven't done much with that because it's basically Gestalt therapy, which is the same thing. So, I mean, I've been doing Gestalt therapy in one way, shape, or form, but my Gestalt therapy is really, there's quite a bit of focus in the back of my mind on helping humanity up level the stage of consciousness that we're at. So that we aren't so identified with the ego mind, but we understand the ego mind and we work with all the impulses and subparts of ourselves. Like the need for approval. I mean, we all have a need for approval.
Yeah. I'm noticing some similarities with spiral dynamics of moving up the spectrum to, I can't remember all the colors, but getting out of the ego and the lower, or Ken Wilber's model. And I see you as a bridging of so many different disciplines. Like I also noticed that your work parallels MVC, but in a much more less rigid, formulaic, which bothers a lot of people who are P's on the Myers-Briggs. It's great for the J's, but we P's.
Yeah, I'm a P.
So,
yeah, well, thank you. I've always been interested in developmental theory, and my first book, which was called Expanding Your Teaching Potential, it's on Kindle now, but it's way out of print. My first book was before the couple's journey, had a lot of stuff on kind of like what Ken Wilber developed, cognitive development, emotional development, moral development, spiritual development, how all the different developmental theories have certain things in common, like you get to the next stage and you include the other stages and so forth. Transcend, Ken Wilber has, he's gone so far beyond where I would have even had the self-discipline to go. So I'm in no way like comparing myself to him, other than that I have that same kind of a mind, but with less discipline.
And yours is accessible, whereas Ken Wilber is like, whoa, my head is spinning.
Yeah, I know. I used to read him and go,
Oh my God.
I'm getting something, but maybe that's sort of what you need to do sometimes with certain books is they blow your mind. You can't really understand them, but I think at this stage, our minds are supposed to be blown.
Yeah.
So good for Ken, I see Getting Real as a transitional growth technology, sort of a transitional between emotional wellness and spiritual evolution, where we get to the identification that is beyond, we don't have a fixed identity.
Transpersonal.
The transpersonal I would be, people say it in so many different ways, but where you do truly feel both your divinity and your oneness with all and your humanity, both and that's, humanity is somehow, I'm going to say we're having trouble with our identity right now, with who we are, and we're being thrown curveballs at every turn, like relativity of truth, what's
Yeah.
truth, fake news. All that stuff I see has an evolutionary purpose to confuse us so we don't think we know. But that's
I
a
like it.
little, but I don't teach that in my workshops. I teach much more practical things like communication tools and self-awareness
Yeah.
tools. I stick with a practical level, but it's pointing you toward holding yourself as a being that's continually open to an ever-changing reality. And I call it surfing life rather than controlling life.
Yes, yes. Well, then you moved on to your next book was had to do with dating. I'm forgetting the exact title.
Truth in Dating.
Truth in Dating, yes.
Yeah.
Which had some radical premises of it's sort of like Alison Armstrong's thing of you're sorting, you want to be right up front and get rid of the losers. Old Alison is such a hoot with her. I remember reading it early on and thinking, yeah, what if I were wound up in blind dates, which I never actually had any, but what a great tool to practice, even if it's a dud.
Yeah, well, my point of view, I want to kind of counter the get rid of the, that everything is about vetting. I mean, vetting a potential partner is important. And I do say in that book, most dating relationships should end. So don't feel like you're a failure. But the real point here is using dating relationships as an awareness path, consciously.
Yeah.
And that has to be done by agreement with the two dating partners. And one person has to initiate by having the truth in dating conversation and all that. It was way too advanced for my audience, I think, and the book didn't sell very well, but it's still perhaps my favorite book.
Interesting.
Of all my books.
Do you think its time is coming? You're going to keep it in print and maybe the millennials and
its time is coming. I do think its time is coming, in small pockets, particularly in places like the poly community, where they know that truth telling is essential. Truth in dating is more popular than among the general public, where most people just want to get to that next date,
Yeah. And then after that, you did Saying What's Real.
Saying What's Real. I still love that book because it's so practical. It just says, here's what to do to bring every conversation into the present moment.
Yes. And then somehow you hooked up with the other John Gray and did the 5-minute relationship repair, which Yvonne and I found essential in our continual rubbing against each other's rough edges that we've smoothed down a fair bit. But say how these evolved for you. How did you wind up moving your work into those arenas?
Yeah, well, ever since I was married to that fourth marriage, I've been interested in triggers, and I've been doing talks on, I used to call it what to do when your buttons get pushed. So it's always been, that was, back in the 80s. And so I've been refining my ideas and eventually wanting to do a book, What to Do with Your Buttons Get Pushed. And then I did a talk at some conference that I called What to Do When Love Hurts. So I thought, well, maybe that'll be my title, because I like that title, What to Do When Love Hurts. I still may write a book by that title. And so I was working on the whole idea of what are the things that knock you out of your ability to be in the present moment. Because getting real is all about practices for bringing more of your whole self into the present. And triggers totally knock you out of the present and sometimes put you into your reptile brain and so forth. So John had been reaching out to me from time to time to co-lead workshops with him. And we never made that happen. But then one time we talked about what he was writing and what I was writing. And we decided, well, let's take a little vacation together. We were just friends. We weren't even that close of friends, but we there was this festival north of here. This is one of those summer music festivals. And we went together and we camped out together and we talked all the way up and all the way back about what would it be like to work together. And we decided then and there to put our two manuscripts together and make one book, that would be fun and a better book. And I think it was a better book than either of us could have written alone. So that's how that happened. We're both interested in these things from our own life experience. And he'd been doing a lot of couples work, as had I.
Yeah, I had not known of him until that book came around. I knew the other John Gray, but I knew of him too. But fascinating. So, and the Honesty Salons, you haven't mentioned them, but when did they start? And that's an
around
ongoing.
1997, when I first moved into this house. I started, that's when I was, occasionally doing a workshop up at Harbin called the, Honesty Event. I started doing honesty salons. I started them once a month for 3 hours in my house. And then I started doing them twice a month for 2 hours. But basically, this form and the guidelines for an honesty salon are in the book Getting Real, Appendix A. Speak from your own experience and stay on your own side of the net, stuff like that. Those guidelines, they've been updated and modified over the last 20 something years, but it's basically, that's the curriculum for an honesty salon, is attempt to follow those guidelines in a circle of people, committed to transparency and authenticity.
And for our viewers who probably never heard of an honesty salon, but my early participation in it was mind-blowing in terms of practice and being in the present with minor stuff. And I remember the one where somebody's cell phone went off early on, and the woman sitting next to her was bothered by it. And we spent 2 hours dealing with everyone's reaction to everyone else's reaction to their reaction. And a seemingly trivial thing was fascinating. It was one of the most memorable salons I've ever been in. But this practice in being real in the present, which we don't get in real life. And I've attempted to recreate in our community in Marin Valley, but it's such a rare experience. And I honor you for continuing to offer it with the diligence over these decades of.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun, because whoever gets the opportunity to be anymore. In the old days, in the 70s, it was called encounter groups, but nowadays just sit without any program of who speaks next. We don't have the talking stick. We don't have exercises where you're going to share how was that exercise for you. I mean, I do that stuff in workshops, but the honesty salon is completely spontaneous. Nobody knows what's going to happen. And I think that's the gift of it, is throwing yourself into a complete unknown with other social creatures, confronting your social anxiety, because I think we all have some social anxiety, whether we know it or not. And like you said, some small incident will happen, but it will illuminate your personality patterns, and when, who goes to judgment right away, who goes to, oh, it's all okay, it's all sweetness and light, and being able to see your personality patterns while the rest of the group's witnessing you too, you become more quickly self-aware of how automatic you might be and how you can actually pause and stop that automatic thing and go, oh, right now I notice that I'm feeling disappointed and hurt because nobody clapped after I said that. Nobody said, oh, well, you're wonderful, and people would confess, kind of pettiness, but it made them more lovable.
And I remember when you busted me on my cute remarks or my bids for attention. I love, is it Gottman, I think, who came up with the term bids for connection? Like,
Yeah, it's a good term.
how often I don't even realize that's what's going on. And being a kind of social outcast as an introverted, too tall for my age, people thinking I'm older than I am and so forth, I could get some attention by doing a little trick. There's actually a picture of me in my playpen bending over looking between my legs so my father would take a picture of it.
Clown.
And I remember doing that for the attention it would get me.
Mm-hmm.
And it evolved into being smart and knowing lots of things. I'm clueless about the relationships going on around me. Yvonne's all tuned into that. I'm looking at the hardware.
Well, that often works for you, Jack, we call it being cute, and everybody laughs, and then you go, okay, I got something out of here, and everybody laugh. But what was I feeling right before that cute remark came out of my mouth? I was feeling, hey, what about me, folks? Or am I okay? Or something, And so you've worked really, I've watched you work with noticing that pattern. And it's so fun to watch your growth.
It's still there, but now,
don't lose it, because sometimes it's really wonderful in a group.
I don't think there's too much of a risk of that. My friend Kent, I don't know if you remember him from the summit that you came to, but we were in your workshop, and
I know.
He and I do a lot of puns together. He's my best buddy, and twins separated at birth, and we stay with him every summer for 2 weeks, and he and his wife and Yvonne and I do couples coaching with each other once a month.
Right.
Daily when we're with them. It's fantastic. But anyway, the issue that I've probably encountered with the most difficulty in wellness, and I actually wrote a paper about it when I was so-called teaching online at RMIT University, which was, we didn't see each other, we didn't talk to each other, it was all online. And if the currency of wellness is connection, what's wrong with this picture? And it wasn't teaching to my mind, but I realized, this is my passion of how do you, the ultimate step in wellness to me is owning your projections and owning your shadow and how that shows up in your judgments. And I love your term self-talk because it defuses the term judgment. It makes it more palatable and transparent. But I continue to struggle with the problem areas of my life, of my estranged younger daughter, and how my shadow is projected onto her. And in our group in Marin Valley that you came and spent an evening with us on, and what we continue to struggle with, of people projecting their shadow on each other and not getting it, and how do you own it? And your tools are the best in terms of getting to the bottom of it. But
the book on triggers, 5-Minute Relationship Repair, that's all about re-owning projections. And I'm with you, Jack. That's the most important of all the true skills if humanity is going to evolve.
Yeah. And it gets so little press.
It does. It's just so much more fun to blame.
Yeah. And when you bring it up, people are like, what? Yeah. And how do we project it in the larger picture of the political situation and the polarization of our culture? And I own, it's like, I can't stand these people, and some of them are my sister and friends who are Trumpsters. And it's like, how do I get beyond my projection, my prejudices? And you can't see through that. And
one of the things is it takes enormous patience, and which most of us are not big on, whether we're part of the red state or the blue states. And one of our shadows, I think, is I just want to do it my way. Can't you idiots see? Because if somebody can't see my way, it slows me down. I can't really get, Congress, the Senate and the House, the Senate's going to slow us down. All of that. That's one of the inquiries I've been doing is what is the shadow of there's quite a few answers to this question. What is the shadow of humanity that needs to be illuminated at this time with Trump in the White House and the polarization? But one of them is I want to get my own way.
Yeah.
See if it fits. If the shoe fits, wear it. But it fits me, frankly.
Well,
I'm trying to be humble about it, but I can get as up on my judgmental place as probably a lot of the rest of us.
Yeah, and we're getting forced into confronting it like never before.
Like never before.
Yeah.
Because those people, I'm making this all in quote, those people really are so frustrating. But here's where connection comes in. It breaks my heart that I can't connect with you, that I can't find any thread of connection, because I see that you're a human being. I see that, in essence, you want good things for your children just like I do.
Yeah.
All of that.
And the other thing that I don't know if you know that Michael Mendiza has taken all of Joe Pierce's books and put them together with about 10% of each book, because I'd only read a few of the later books, beginning with Cracking the Cosmic Egg, and he's threaded them together into one book that he's trying to get, his publisher, the one that did all these books, trying to get them to do it. And I proofed it for him. And it's fascinating the degree to which basically we're in this culture that we don't even recognize, like the fish in water. And we think we have a lot more free, what is the term?
Free will?
Free will than we do.
Right.
And
I'd love to see that manuscript, so send me a link on that.
I think he'd be fine with that. I'm going to interview him in a few weeks. Michael's done a fabulous job of supporting Joe, and turns out Joe's daughter lives in Hamilton, right across from us, and I've gotten to know her. She's 38. Yeah, Shakti. She was a babysitter for Sienna when we lived in Virginia near Joe, and I knew her from there. I didn't know her very well, but now at age 38, and she's a yoga teacher, beautiful young woman who's starting to do writing of her own, and she really gets her dad's work, which unfortunately neither of my daughters get any of my work and think I'm crazy, but it's a treat to see her evolving. So got off on a sidetrack there with Joe Pierce, with this issue of culture and the degree that we are enmeshed in it. And wow. Yeah. So where to in the future, Susan? What's your wisdom for future generations who I hope will be watching this long after we're gone and maybe getting some benefit from in the old and prehistoric days of an evolved culture that we hope will happen?
Yeah. Well, I think I'm continuing to refine the ideas that I've worked with up to this point. I don't have any big new thing. Every once in a while I think, I'll do something on has to do with aging, because I'm getting old. Getting real about getting older. Or I had thought of a book about when one member of a couple is healthy and the other one's kind of disabled or falling apart, the new kind of conflicts at this developmental stage. I'm kind of interested in those things, but my passion is always going to be getting real, personal and cultural evolution, and just learning to do better and better what I'm already doing. So I'm not sure about next books, but there is one bubbling in me that has something to do with learning how to see what's what more realistically and, giving some practical tools to, it's like getting real volume 2, like really sharpening
Yeah.
up your ability to learn from your experience. But to do that, you need to be better at experiencing your experience and being even more refined in your ability to see what is fearlessly, because there's so much denial and so much fear of emotional pain that's still in there, that I think helping people more efficiently process the emotional pain of triggers, the emotional pain of all the daily stresses, being able to process that, because I have a lot of tools that work really well for me. I'm at peace in love all the time, even though I joke about having judgments and this and that. I honestly don't take that level of reality seriously. And I don't know how to put into words what really has worked for me quite yet, but I'm going to work on that for my next book.
Well, and I'm moved by the idea of, as we're aging, and I've just discovered that my therapist, who's a few months younger than me, back in the 70s when I was doing reparenting and transactional analysis, that she's got severe cognitive impairment. I went to see her. She just moved to California from Baltimore. And it was shocking to, and she'd phoned me 3 times in a row, repeating the same thing. Did you just call me? And to see someone that like you was a mentor and so regressed, it's horrifying. Not to mention physical problems of when Yvonne is sick and how I feel helpless, and it's going to get, my sister's a widow, my second partner Joy is a widow, my co-author Regina is a widow, dealing with deaths, and it's harder on the person who's left.
I know. I'm truly interested in all of that too.
Yeah.
So maybe if I live long enough, I'll get around to, the developmental tasks of this final stage of life.
Yeah. Well, now I want to come back to the couples thing again of you're meeting Peter and this man in your life that I really admire, and watched the two of you together. And can you say something about that in terms of?
Well, I hit the jackpot this time, and I made up my mind that I was going to stop just having playmates, because after my divorce, I thought, oh, I'll find the man of my dreams, rather quickly if I'm just single for long enough. But no, that didn't happen. So I started having playmates, and, there was always a man in there in my life because I love attention. But then I decided I was going to stop doing that and kind of choose somebody who I could grow old with. And I totally chose the right person. And he was just right there where I was. And we have one of those relationships where you both love each other equally. There's no pursuer, distancer, and we're still hot for each other. And he's like 81 and I'm 78. So I want to say that sex can get better, less frequent perhaps, because we're kind of lazy. You sort of I give into inertia at this stage of my life a lot more, which for me is like just part of aging, which is okay with me. But anyway, the thing with Peter is exciting and wonderful, and every day's a sitcom and every day's an adventure. We just love the life that we're creating, and it's very creative. For me, creativity is kind of my essential place.
Exactly.
Co-creativity is even more beautiful, and we're just creating a life together.
How did you find him?
A dating site called Senior People Meet, which is no longer in existence.
And was he nearby, or how did you?
He was in Healdsburg and I was in Sebastopol. He was about 45-minute drive. So that was easy. That was easy to start a relationship.
And what's been 5, 6, 7 years? How long?
Between 5 and 6 years, I guess, maybe 6 now.
Well,
yes, you can find love at old age.
I know. I was 68 when I found Yvonne, and she was almost 68, and it's we're both discouraged or a little disappointed it took us so long, but we're making the most of it. And
Yeah, that's great. I love you
our
guys together.
yeah, we just we have more fun together. She'll be here in a week in Australia. We'll have 2 months together. It's our playtime for every year when we cycle through the seasons as I move from one side of the planet to the other.
Yeah.
Well, that's delightful. And any final other words for our viewers out there in wherever they are and whenever they are?
Let's see, final words. Learning to embrace the normal emotional pains of life gives you so much freedom versus thinking there's something wrong with you or something wrong with somebody else when love hurts a little bit, or even when work hurts. You know, it's not like I want everybody to become masochists and, you know, tolerate abuse, but this whole pain avoidance thing, I think we can get to a better place with being able to hold discomfort in love. So that's my vision for myself and for the people I'm trying to help right now.
Wow, what a fitting summation of a lifetime that's hardly over.
Yeah.
Incredible contributions to our to me and the world. Oh, thank you so much, Susan.
Thanks for doing this, Jack. And I just love that you're doing this. I just want to honor you for you really do stay connected with the people who are important to you. You have said the currency of wellness is connection. And I see you as a living model of this, more than me. So
well, it's making
you're
up for
my model for that, for sure.
Well, thank you. It's the family I didn't have growing up.
Well, you got this giant family who loves you now, Jack.
And it's a delight to be able to pull it together in this document that we're making. So thank you.
All righty.